Everyone, and welcome to the calm. I think this might become my new intro. Let me know, but it's FF inspired just like my name, so we could tweak it together if it's not that cool. But anyways, in today's video, we will be diving into Final Fantasy XVI, for which I was kindly gifted the PC port from Square Enix, so thank you to them. I appreciate it so much. This game has sparked a lot of chatter with opinions kind of all over the place. For some, it didn't quite land. For others, it's a masterpiece. I'm here to share my take on the experience that I had with the game and add to the conversation. We'll be chatting about the story, characters, gameplay, visuals, music, basically an entire breakdown. And just as a quick reminder, before we get started, these are all just my opinions, and I would love to hear what you all think of the game as well. So make sure to leave a comment down below, like this video, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these kinds of videos and want to see more. And with that said, let's get into it. So these were my thoughts before I ever played the game in the first place. If you're new here, let me give you a little background on my journey with Final Fantasy. I'm currently still on it, but it's been so incredible so far. I aim to eventually play all of the mainline FF games, or at least most of them, but FF 16 is the third Final Fantasy game I've ever played. Before diving into it, I had only played FF 7 Remake and Crisis Core Reunion, so when Final Fantasy 16 was announced, I was beyond excited. Not only was it a chance to explore a new chapter of this franchise I've grown to love, but it was also a fresh opportunity to experience something completely different. The first time I saw FF 16 was through the Awakening trailer back in 2020. It immediately caught my attention with its medieval aesthetic and the prominent role that the summons we've come to know and love might have in the story. I love the idea of the series revisiting its roots with its classic high fantasy vibe, but for me, it was something entirely new within the franchise, and I just literally couldn't wait to dive into it. So I originally first played FF 16 when it came out on the PS5 in June of 2023, but I once again was so honored to be able to play through parts of the game again with the most recent PC port, thank you to Square Enix. But being able to revisit this game inspired me to make this video, because I remember having thoughts on the game as a whole, both positive and negative. But the opening of the game starts with one of the most beautiful voices I think I've ever heard. Let's just take a moment to listen.
It was Moss the Chronicler who said that the land of Valisthea is blessed in the light of the Mother Crystals.
I'm sorry, what were we talking about again? Right, beginning of the game. But I mean, I think you guys all feel me on this. But right from the start, players find out that Valisthea, the world of the game, has been thriving for generations. Thanks to Aether flowing through the Mother Crystals, Aether is the go-to source for magic and energy that powers everyday lives, which you will learn as the story goes on. From here, we transitioned into probably one of the most epic intros I've seen. Phoenix and Ifrit are going ham at each other, and I remember sitting there like, what did I do? Why are we fighting? What's happening? This fight at the beginning honestly pumped me up, and then I saw him, Clive. Which, by the way, it's really cool that I'm recording this today. Today, if you guys don't know, is December 16th, and Clive is out for Tekken 8. So if you have Tekken 8, you guys should get Clive and beat up some people. But anywho, Final Fantasy has some of the hottest characters I've ever seen in gaming, and Clive is no exception to that. We learned that Clive is the firstborn son of the Archduke of Rosaria and was expected to be the Phoenix's dominant. Essentially, a dominant is a person who holds the power of an icon or summon, but it turns out that the role turned to Clive's younger brother, Joshua. This also meant that Clive had to grow up with one of the most despicable, evil, horrible ladies I've ever seen, his mother. She continued to ridicule him and talk down to Clive because he was not the chosen dominant. I swear throughout the game, this lady makes it so easy to hate her, and I'll just leave it at that. In this case, though, Clive is trained to be Joshua's shield, to be able to protect and essentially become his guardian. This allowed him to inherit a tiny bit of the Phoenix's power as well. Because the Aether is slowly fading away from the mother crystals, it is creating a divide between the other realms of Valisthea. And it's because of this that we see Rosaria get invaded by the Empire. With this surprise attack, we see Joshua become full of rage and lose control over his icon. Clive does his best to calm down Joshua, and while doing so, he becomes chosen as the dominant of Ifrit, the second icon of fire. This whole section connects to the very beginning moments of Phoenix and Ifrit fighting one another. I don't want to go too in depth into what happens for the rest of the story, but in my opinion, FF16 started with a really strong intro. I felt pretty hooked from the get-go. I have heard some people say that they feel that the intro's too long, but for me, I just really like the character and world building, so it really didn't bother me. In short, the rest of the story follows Clive on an ultimate journey across the multiple regions where his goal is to destroy the mother crystals across Valisthea. After learning that Ultima wants to create a new world and destroy Valisthea altogether. Multiple things within the story do get revealed, but I will leave that up for you to find out if you want to play the game. Overall, though, I had a great time with the story. There were moments where the pacing kind of threw me off, making certain parts feel less impactful, but this was especially noticeable in the middle portion of the game for me, which sometimes felt a bit dragged out, partly because I was trying to tackle every single side mission to take a break from the main story, but I will talk more on that later in the video. One thing I appreciated was the game's theme of differences and the value of individuals. FF16 does a fantastic job of building a dense, lived-in world and showing how the people of Valisthea navigate their lives. Not everyone has it easy, and even our main crew are considered outcasts. Their fight for equality and a better world where everyone is treated the same is compelling to me. Knowing that what they're striving for from the beginning makes it easier for me to connect to their struggles and root for them every step of the way. This brings me to my favorite part of the game, though, the characters themselves. Let's talk about the main cast and some of my favorites from Final Fantasy XVI and what I think makes them incredible. One of the most memorable parts of the game for me has to be my love for some of these characters, and we will of course start with Mr. Handsome himself, Clive. Clive isn't just a good-looking guy with incredible charm. He's a fantastic protagonist in every sense. At least to me, he is. Watching him grow up throughout the story helps you connect with him. You see his backstory, how his experiences shape him, and what turns him into the man you journey with. As a kid, Clive is innocent, kind, honorable, and incredibly caring. His determination to prove his worth to his family and support Joshua is honestly inspiring. What's amazing is that he never let jealousy or bitterness creep in, even though he wasn't chosen as the Phoenix's dominant. Instead, he dedicates himself fully to being Joshua's shield and respecting his father's legacy, while also standing up for others, especially the Branded. Branded are people with natural magic who are treated as outcasts and slaves. Even at a young age, Clive sees their worth and treats them as equals. Despite his mother's harsh treatment, Clive just never shows resentment. Instead, he channels his pain and he becomes the best version of himself for his family. As the story unfolds, he remains this compassionate, selfless person, often taking on a lot more burdens than he should to protect those that he loves. While his stubbornness sometimes keeps him from asking for help, it's clear everything he does comes from a place of deep love and devotion to his friends and, of course, Joshua. It's also really cool that we get an older protagonist, by the way. By the later parts in the game, Clive is in his 30s, and it's refreshing to experience the story through that perspective. Seeing his journey as an adult adds a layer of maturity and depth, and in some ways, it makes certain struggles he's faced feel kind of more relatable. Next, we have Joshua. Joshua is one of those characters you immediately just want to protect. It's not just because he's frail and sickly compared to his older brother Clive, but because of the enormous pressure placed on him as the chosen dominant of the Phoenix at just such a young age. Despite being her favorite, Joshua's ruthless mother once again treated him poorly in her way of keeping him confined to the castle and being overprotective, which only made things harder for him. Even though Clive seemed like a more natural choice to be the dominant, Joshua worked tirelessly to prove himself and make everyone proud. During the Empire's attack, Joshua faces a devastating turning point when his father, Elwyn Rossfield, is killed. Having lived such a sheltered life, Joshua was not prepared for the horrors of war or the crushing pain of loss. His grief and rage consumed him, leading to a moment where his emotions completely took over. And from that point forward, he was forever changed. Joshua's journey is compelling because he channels that pain into purpose. Though he grows more serious and determined, his deep compassion for others never wavers. He fights relentlessly to protect his people and his brother, making incredible sacrifices along the way. Even when he knows the risk to himself, Joshua never hesitates if it means protecting the ones that he loves or fighting for the greater good. His selflessness and resolve make him honestly an unforgettable character, and I just have so much love for Joshua. Okay, we got Miss Jill. Miss Jill. She is our lady of the hour. It's not actually going to take me an hour to talk about her, but here's some things that I really like about Jill. Jill is such a beautiful character inside and out. From the moment she was introduced, I honestly was already shipping her and Clive. I think it's pretty evident with them, but they just felt like soulmates from the start. And trust me, all the tension between them throughout the story is very worth it. Jill grew up as a ward of the Rossfield family, spending her childhood alongside Clive and Joshua. She was such a kind and respectful girl who loved all her time in the castle with them. But her life took a heartbreaking turn after the attacks at Phoenix Gate and the Phoenix and Ifrit battle. She was kidnapped by the Iron Kingdom and awakened as the dominant of Shiva, becoming a weapon for their cause. They even made her fight and kill enslaved people, leaving deep emotional scars within her. When she reconnects with Clive eventually, Jill begins to open up about her beliefs, especially her desire for equality and justice. As you guys can all see, there is a running theme here with a lot of our characters. She's passionate about creating a world where everyone is treated fairly. Some of her most powerful moments come as she confronts her frustrations, whether it's watching other bearers not fight for themselves or facing the pain and trauma from her time with the Iron Kingdom. Her journey is one of resilience and rediscovery, and it's incredibly moving to watch. That said, though, I do wish Jill had more screen time. She honestly, to me, has so much potential and her story is fascinating, but there's moments where she kind of feels sidelined. As a main party member for much of the game, it would have been amazing to hear her thoughts and see her play a more active role in the narrative. Still, though, the moments we do get with her are impactful and showcase her strength, compassion, and determination to heal and fight for what's right. I just wish there was more. Now we got big boy Sid. Now. This, everyone, is probably one of the most scrumdiddlyushous characters I've also ever met in a video game before. This here is Sid. If you've played a Final Fantasy game before, you probably know the name. It's pretty much a tradition at this point where a bunch of Sids are always in Final Fantasy. But the Sid in FF 16, he is on his own level. This Sid is rugged, sarcastic, hilarious, but he's also got this incredible warmth to him. He's the guy who sees injustice and does something about it. He's sick of how bearers are treated like dirt and takes it upon himself to create a sanctuary, pretty much a hideaway where they can find peace and be free from the cruelty of the world. And Sid's been fighting for others for a long time. He even saved Benedicta, which will be another character I will talk about shortly. But early in his life, Sid worked under Barnabas, who I like to call Barnacle, but that's just me. But as time went on, he realized that he couldn't follow the paths of either Barnabas or Benedicta because their ideals clashed with his own. What makes Sid truly legendary is his persistence. Bears across Valisthea know his name because of everything he's done to protect and support them. What I admire most about him is that he sticks to what he believes is right, no matter how hard the road gets. Even when Benedicta, someone he cared about deeply but couldn't save, he never stopped hoping for the best in her. Sid's the kind of character who inspires you, not just because he's brave or clever, because he's proof that you can fight for what's right and leave a meaningful legacy. He's the heart of this game in so many different ways, and I believe left such an impact on the world of Valisthea. Benedicta. Benedicta is a character who makes a very strong impression right away. From the moment we meet her, it's clear she's not exactly warm and fuzzy. She's pretty much cold and at times downright ruthless, but she's definitely loyal. Sure, but if she thinks you are weak or not worthy, she will tear you apart without hesitation. As we learned with Sid, Benedicta's story starts when he saves her as a kid and brings her under his wing. Eventually, she ended up working for Barnabas and got into a relationship with Hugo Kupka. Yeah, I don't quite see the appeal, but hey, you do you, girl. But things took a turn when Sid broke away from Barnabas's group. That right there, though, shook her. Sid was the first person who made her feel like she belonged somewhere and gave her a sense of home. Over time, she fell in love with him, so when he walked away, it left her feeling abandoned and completely heartbroken. From there, her bitterness and grudge started to grow, though deep down, she still hoped Sid would come back. As her story continues, she faces more struggles, especially after losing what made her feel powerful. She spiraled, feeling like a failure to Barnabas and ready to give up on life altogether. I won't spoil the rest. You'll have to play the game once again to see how it all unfolds, but it's hard not to feel for Benedicta. She didn't have an easy life, and I think her hunger for power came from a time when she had none. Sid was the only bright spot in her world, and losing him brought all her insecurities rushing back. Beneath that tough, icy exterior, she was just someone searching for a sense of belonging and comfort. At the end of the day, she was more vulnerable than she let on. Okay, guys, I have another one. Dion. Oh my gosh, I love Dion. He's such an incredible character. He's the son of the Emperor of the Holy Empire, born out of an affair with a courtesan because the Empress couldn't have children. From the start, Dion's father was ruthless and piled an immense amount of pressure on him, pushing him hard as a child. That intensity shaped Dion into a brilliant and skilled warrior, as well as an intelligent leader. As the story unfolds, we do learn that Dion gets a little brother, which kind of shifts his world just a little bit. But he focuses on climbing the ranks in the military with his longtime friend Terrence by his side as his assistant. These two, they go way back, having been friends since they were kids. At one point, though, Dion is gravely injured in battle, and Terrence never leaves his side. In a moment of vulnerability, Terrence confesses his feelings for Dion, and their friendship blossoms into a beautiful relationship. It's such a heartwarming representation of love, and it's amazing to see this kind of story in Final Fantasy and gaming just in general. Things take a turn when Dion learns his little brother will be named the new heir. This news kind of shakes him, and from there, his journey becomes more painful and tragic. Without giving too much away, because you do need to experience this yourself, Dion's story is one of heartbreak and struggle. Despite being the perfect prince on the outside, he's constantly torn between his own beliefs and his father's demands, facing decisions that test his sanity and push him to the edge. Dion's character is deeply moving. He's caught in the middle of forces beyond his control, doing things he never wanted to do, which only brings him more pain. I can't help but wish the world for him. He truly does deserve so much more. All right, and now I just wanted to give a little shout out to my little animal friends, Torgal and Ambrosia. I just have to give love to them. The animal sidekicks in FF 16. They're such a special part of the game. Torgal starts as this adorable wolf pup gifted to Clive and Joshua when they were kids. He's like a true member of the Rossfield family and has this sweet bond with Jill. You always see them sticking so close together, but after the chaos at Phoenix Gate, Torgal gets separated from everyone. The game doesn't explain exactly, I think, how it happened, but somehow he ends up with Sid. From there, though, he's just the best, loyal, caring, and smart little doggo you can ever have. Honestly, Torgal feels like everyone's best friend throughout the entire story. And then there's Ambrosia, Clive's courageous and loyal steed. She doesn't get a ton of moments to shine, but you can tell she's always dependable and she deserves some love too. Overall, I just love the animal companions in this game. Shout out to them always. All right, let's dive into the gameplay of Final Fantasy XVI. Overall, I'd say it's good, but I do have a few gripes. For starters, this game switches things up with an action-based combat system, a first for the series. At first, I was pretty hyped. It looked flashy and fun, but after a while, the excitement kind of wore off for me, and the combat started to feel a bit draining. I can see the potential in this kind of system for the series, but what I felt like I got was kind of lackluster. The combat didn't really hold my attention or feel all that challenging to me. I'm not saying every game needs to be super tough or anything like that, but it felt like I could just spam abilities without ever having to think about it. And I just miss having to strategize a little bit more. Those accessories that automate blocking and parrying, oh my God, please, if you want any challenge whatsoever, just take those completely off because that is just way too easy. But there was even a moment mid boss battle where I closed my eyes, mashed some buttons, and still won without dying. That says kind of a lot about how low stakes it felt to me sometimes. But that said, I do have to mention that the icon fights, I love those. But once again, and here's a big but, they could be a bit frustrating for me. Sometimes you'd be in the middle of this really epic, larger than life kind of fight, and then bam, cutscene. Sometimes the fight would just end because of it too sometimes. I get that they wanted to make these moments cinematic, but it kind of pulled me out of the action at times. I wish they had let us fully play through the fight and save the crazy epic moments for after, but there were times I felt like I could just put the controller down and watch, which isn't exactly what I want from a big exciting boss battle. Another issue I had was with the side quests and the pacing of them. I am not a completionist by any means, but I usually do go out of my way to do a good majority of the side quests. But here though, I wish I had it. Most of them felt super boring and forgettable. There was like a few good ones that were tied to like your party members towards the end of the game. And there was this one creepy girl at the beginning that was just really weird. But aside from that, I wish the side quests had been more meaningful. I also felt like there were moments when I'd entered these huge, beautiful landscapes on my journey, but then there wouldn't be much to actually do. I'd be running around these vast areas and it felt kind of empty at times. Sure, you'd come across side missions or enemies would spawn in as you run around, but aside from that, it didn't always feel like there was much to engage with. I really wish there was more little things to discover or interact with in these big open spaces. It would have helped make those moments feel a little bit more alive and memorable for me, instead of just running through to get to the next objective. The pacing of the game was also just, in general, kind of all over the place for me. It was fast, then it was slow, and then it was fast again, and there would just be these really exciting moments where so much was happening and I'd get really hype, but then there'd be these long, slow stretches that felt kind of like a drag. It made it hard for me to stay engaged. And about the lore, I usually love lore in games. It helps me feel very immersed, but in FF16, it felt like that's all they wanted to do. Sometimes the lore came through in a way that broke the flow for me, like having to pause during cutscenes to read world history if I wanted to. You know, at first it was cool, but eventually I just kind of stopped bothering with it. Other times it was endless dialogue dumps that lacked variety or cinematic flair. And I just wish they'd found more creative ways to weave the lore into the gameplay and story. But you know, that's just me. So yeah, while the gameplay has some great ideas and moments, it didn't always stick the landing with me. Now I know what you're probably thinking, Tanya, what do you even like about the game? Because I just said a bunch of negatives right there. And you know, I do have pretty big gripes with it, but despite all of that, I still found myself coming back to it and enjoying a lot of what it had to offer. What kept me hooked were the more mature themes, the incredible world setting, and most importantly, the cast of characters. The characters were so memorable and well done that they carried the game for me. Because I cared so much about them, I couldn't help but push through to see how their stories unfolded and where they'd end up. And I'm really glad that I did. The story itself might not be groundbreaking, but it left a real impact on me. Some moments genuinely made me cry, which says a lot about how much I did connect with it. Even though some parts of the story were predictable, there were still surprises that kept me invested. So Yeah, while I had my issues with the gameplay, I still enjoyed my time with the game overall. And looking back on it, I think about it fondly. It might not be perfect, but it still managed to leave its mark on me. All right, the visuals. FF16 looks amazing, and on PC, it's even sharper than it was when I first played it on the PS5. Honestly, the visuals really shine during the cinematics, especially in those epic icon battles or just the huge intense fights scattered throughout the game. But the scale of the battles is honestly crazy to me, and the level of detail in the environments and the character designs really add to the atmosphere. From the very start, I was hooked and super excited to see where the rest of the game would take me. I also love the very small details like the clothes that the characters wear and how each one design fits perfectly within the setting. Throughout my playthrough, I kept thinking how gorgeous this game was. It's got a real sense of beauty to it to me, whether it's the landscapes or the character models, but that said, during the slower, more dialogue heavy moments, the visuals do drop off a tiny bit. They still look fine, but the real issue for me was the character animations. Sometimes the lip syncing would kind of fall off a little bit, and the movements could feel a little stiff and out of place. But honestly, it's not a deal breaker, at least for me by any means, but it does stand out just a tiny bit, especially compared to how smooth and polished action sequences are within the game. Now we get to talk about a little bit of the music. It's no surprise that a Final Fantasy game has amazing music, and FF16 definitely delivers on that front. While there wasn't a track that hit me the same way as maybe some iconic ones from past games did, like FF7 Prelude or Xanarkin theme from FF10 or anything like that, FF16 still manages to completely immerse me in its world. The soundtrack fits the setting perfectly and really enhances the overall experience, in my opinion. The battle music in particular had me on the edge of my seat. Tracks like the classic battle theme got stuck in my head, and I'd find myself humming them while playing as I just run across the world. Then you have those really intense tracks like All Is One that had me feeling like I was fighting for my life. It's the kind of music that really pumps you up, is what I'm trying to say, and it gets you fully engaged within the action. Another thing that I really love about the OST is that it has diversity though. Even though the game is very action heavy and the stakes are high throughout the story, there's also more somber, soothing tracks that balance it out. Songs like Lunar Serenade and Forevermore really stand out for me on their emotional depth and calming vibe. But overall, I think the OST for FF16 is absolutely gorgeous, and it deserves to be appreciated just as much as the legendary soundtracks from other Final Fantasy games. Okay. So let me answer the big question. Does Final Fantasy XVI hold up as an entry in the franchise? And is it a game that I enjoyed? The answer is a big yes. I genuinely had a great time with Final Fantasy XVI. And when the game first came out, I remember seeing a lot of people tearing it into shreds for various reasons. But hey, everyone experiences things differently. For me, I had a pretty positive experience, and I approached the game by looking at what it offered on its own, rather than constantly comparing it to the other entries in the series that I've already played. Of course, I'm aware of its flaws, but underneath those, I found a lot of substance. What really stood out to me were the characters, the music, and the story, but especially just Clive's overall journey and the themes of fighting for what's right, no matter the cost. It's about building a better world so others can live in peace and equality. The game also shows off what Final Fantasy can do with cinematics, and I'm excited to see how they continue to push that forward. As for the battle system, while it wasn't perfect for me, it definitely laid the groundwork for something that could be even better in the future, if they decide to tackle it again. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the next mainline Final Fantasy entry will bring, and honestly, I'm excited to dive into other games in this franchise because I know there's Final Fantasy games out there for everyone, each with its own special charm. My journey through the series isn't over, and I'll definitely be diving back into FF16, probably with a new game plus at some point in the future to relive its greatness. But thank you so much. If you made it to the end of this video, seriously, it means a lot. I've been working on this video for way too long, like honestly over a month or two just to write it, but a lot of things in my life just kind of got in the way, and I just couldn't find the time until now. So thank you so much for being so patient with me. I love making these videos and I hope to keep doing more. If you like this video and want to see more, please leave a like once again, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. I also stream over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Tomberry, and I post my stream schedule over in my community Discord, which you can find in the description down below if you want to join the Mako Berry crew. But with that, I'll catch you all next time. Happy gaming!